The Japanese invasion of Burma 1941 to 1942. Japanese planning. The Japanese were trying to avoid war before 1940 with the Western powers, mainly Great Britain and USA. After 1940 they saw this as almost inevitable. All of the Japanese operations in the Indochina area was to get access to natural resources and also create a buffer against later counterattacks. They occupied Vichy French Indochina for the resources. They attacked Malaya to remove the threat from the naval base at Singapore and also get resources. The campaign in Burma was a sideshow. The main aim was to cut the Burma Road that supplied the Chinese armies fighting against Japan in China. It was also a possible invasion route into India, and it had resources, oil fields that the Japanese wanted to get their hands on. The 15th Japanese Army was tasked with this attack, and it was formed in November 1941. It would in the end contain 4 divisions, the 18th, 33rd, 55th and 56th Divisions, commanded by General Shoichiro Ida. They did extensive research about Burma, about the British forces in the country, what the terrain conditions were, and they created a pamphlet that they handed out to all their soldiers, how it was to fight in Burma, the same way they did in Malaya. They realized that Rangoon was the key to conquer Burma, as it was the only harbor that could supply a force in the country. To reach that goal, they would need to take the Moulmein base and also capture crossings over both Salween and Sitang rivers. Later they would strike north, cutting the Burma Road. They would use 2 divisions for the initial attack, the 33rd and 55th Division. The British preparations. Burma was a hard colony to govern, with some part of the population rather siding with the Japanese than the British. The British also knew that the key to Burma was Rangoon, the only port that could supply any British force in Burma. The threat of a serious invasion was initially considered unlikely because of the poor road conditions in the country. After the invasion of Malaya on the 8th of December 1941 and Thailand joining Japan, it was now assumed that an attack could take place, but it was still considered unlikely. The British would have 2 divisions to defend the country when the real invasion started, the 17th Indian Division and the 1st Burma Division. Air power was seen as a key for the defense of Burma. However, they had no bombers in the country and very few fighters. The general plan was to defend Burma and harass Thailand, even though they really did not have any forces for offensive operations. General Donald Kenneth MacLeod was commander, but General Thomas Jacob Hutton would take over as commander in Burma. The strategy was to meet the Japanese as close to the border as possible to gain time for reinforcements to arrive. The Burma Army was subordinate to the American, British, Dutch, Australian command led by General Wavell. Trained mostly to fight in and around the roads, but some steps were made to train for jungle warfare. The forces were under-equipped and the Air Force had obsolete fighters. Another force in the country was the American Volunteer Group, the AVG, more famously known as the Flying Tigers. They were US volunteers training in Burma at the time of the Japanese invasion. The battle begins. British forces are deployed as follows. The 1st Burma Brigade and the 13th Indian Brigade is defending the southern Shan states. The 2nd Burma Brigade is defending the southern part of Burma. 11th of December, Japanese airplanes attacks Tavoy Air Base. By the 12th of December, small groups of Japanese soldiers are infiltrating into the country. The AVG will send 1 squadron from Tungo to Mingalado to protect Rangoon. 16th of December. 1 battalion from the 143rd Infantry Regiment of the 55th Japanese Division attacks the southernmost point of Burma and captures Victoria Point and the airfield there. Between the 23rd and the 25th of December, Japanese planes bomb Rangoon. It is now also decided that the 5th and 6th Chinese armies will move into northern Burma to help defend the country. Each Chinese army is about the size of a normal division. On the 27th of December, General Hutton takes command in Burma. In January, the 17th Indian Division, with only one brigade, the 46th Indian Brigade, arrives in Burma. Meanwhile, the Japanese 55th Division and the 33rd Division is concentrating at Raheng. Between the 15th and the 19th of January, the 112th Regiment from the 55th Japanese Division attack Tavoy, which is defended by the 6th Burma Rifle Battalion from the 2nd Burma Brigade. Fighting will continue from the 15th to the 19th of January, when Tavoy and its airfield is captured by the Japanese. The 6th Burma Rifles takes heavy casualties, and they are now only a skeleton force. The British forces at Margui is evacuated to Rangoon. The Japanese now have 3 airfields in Burma: Victoria Point, Tavoy and Margui. 21st of January. The 16th Indian Brigade is holding Kavkareik, but have to pull back after a heavy attack by the 55th Japanese Division. 31st of January. The 48th Indian Brigade arrives in Rangoon, and it is attached to the 17th Indian Division. Moulmein has been attacked. It is held by part of the 2nd Burma Brigade. British forces have to pull back, and the Japanese creates a holding force north of Martaban, almost encircling the 2nd Burma Brigade's forces in the area. They are transported by ferry over the river. However, some soldiers have to swim, leaving behind a large amount of equipment and supplies. 11th of February. One battalion from the 46th Indian Brigade at Kuseik is destroyed by the 33rd Japanese Division. British forces are forced back towards the Bilin River, where they intend to hold the Japanese. The battle at Bilin River to Sitang Bridge, 14th to 23rd of February. Brigadier Smythe, commander of the 17th Indian Division, wants to pull back from the Bilin River, but he is ordered to hold this position by General Hutton. Smythe places his troops as follows: the 16th Brigade south of Yangon, and south of the 16th Brigade the 48th Indian Brigade, which have some units on the eastern side of the river. The 46th Indian Brigade is holding in the area of Kialikto. The Japanese will attack with the 215th Regiment from the 33rd Division along the river, and the 143rd Regiment of the 55th Division from the south. On the 16th, the 215th Regiment attacks and crosses the river in the north and pushes the 16th Brigade back. In the south, the Japanese has pushed the 48th Indian Brigade away from its position east of the river. During the 16th and 17th, both British brigades counterattacks, but are unable to dislodge the enemy, who now has a foothold over the river, even if it still is contested. By the 18th of February, the 143rd Regiment from the 55th Japanese Division lands at Sokali and starts pushing north, threatening the flank of the 17th Indian Division. Both British brigades of the 17th Indian Division continues to counterattack during the 18th and 19th of February, but they cannot halt or push the Japanese back. Between the 19th and 20th of February, the 17th Indian Division starts retreating towards the Sitang River and the railway bridge, as it is now threatened to be cut off. The order is however sent in clear text, intercepted by the Japanese 215th Regiment, who rushes to get to the bridge first. The 48th Indian Brigade is to hold the bridge, allowing the 16th Brigade and the 46th Brigade to cross the river before they blow it up. The retreating British forces are strafed and low on water, and the men are tired. They are heading towards the bridge and the relative safety via a single road. That single road slows them down. On the 21st, the 46th Indian Brigade is attacked at Kyalikto, but they beat back the Japanese. However, other Japanese forces are now close to the bridge. Meanwhile, Brigadier Smythe has moved his HQ west of the river, and he is no longer in contact with these brigadiers. Japanese 33rd Division keeps attacking the 17th Indian Division, and by the 22nd they are fighting close to the bridge. The 16th and 46th Brigades are still east of the bridge, when Smythe decides that the only course of action is to blow the bridge, which is done early on the 23rd, stranding 2/3 of his division on the wrong side of the river. Most are captured or killed, however 3,000 men swim the river, leaving all equipment behind. One such soldier was Bill Norman, who swam the river on a bamboo pole together with a fellow soldier. After a long walk, wearing only shorts, encountering some friendly and some hostile Burmese villages, they reach the British lines, where they are quickly arrested for not having uniforms or any weapons. 21st of February. The 7th Armored Brigade arrives from fighting North Africa, and it is directly driven from Rangoon to the front. The 17th Indian Division is now down to around 3,800 men, with no heavy weapons and few light weapons. The men from the 46th Brigade is divided among the other two brigades of the division. The 48th Brigade is holding at Pegu. The 1st Burma Division is to the north, 1st Burma Brigade at Kyauktaga and the 2nd Burma Brigade at Nyangilebin. The northern part of the Sitang Valley is defended by the 13th Indian Brigade, holding Karan Hills and the Salwen. Battle of Pegu and the Tayukian roadblock, 23rd of February to 7th of March. 27th of February, Hutton sends a smaller part of the 7th Armored Brigade with some infantry to Tarawadi. The 17th Indian Division will move back from Pegu to Lego, and the units from the 7th Armored Brigade at Vav would pull back to Pegu. The 63rd Indian Brigade is at sea, and Hutton orders it not to sail to Rangoon but to Calcutta instead. 1st and 2nd of March, General Wavell flies to Burma to see the situation. Finding that Brigadier Smythe, in command of the 17th Indian Division, is sick, he orders Hutton to replace him with Brigadier Cowan. General Wavell then informs the new commander in Burma, General Alexander, that it is vital to hold Rangoon, but if that is not possible, he should avoid being encircled and protect oil fields to the north and link up with Chinese forces. 3rd of March, the 2 Japanese division crosses the Sitang River. The aim for the 33rd Division is to move towards Lego and the 55th Division to attack Pegu. Part of the 55th Division creates a roadblock at Pyuntasa. It also crosses the river north of Pegu to envelop British forces. The 33rd Division also crosses the river with the aim to strike southwest. General Hutton orders 7th Armored Brigade to capture Vav, but the Japanese forces hold the town, and they are also at Kyalikla. They attack, but they cannot force the Japanese back. Hutton now orders the 48th Brigade to fall back from Pegu to Lego, 16th Brigade to take up position at Tayukan. Alexander sees that the Japanese are moving between the 17th Indian Division and the 1st Burma Division. He cancels the order sent by Hutton. The 63rd Infantry Brigade, together with the 17th Indian Division and the 7th Armored Brigade, should attack in the direction of Vav. The 1st Burma Division should attack south from Nyangilebin. The 143rd Japanese Regiment of the 55th Japanese Division attacks Pegu, penetrating into the city. Meanwhile, the 63rd Indian Brigade is moving from Lego towards Pegu, but they find a Japanese blocking force southwest of the town. High-ranking officers of the brigade, possibly also the brigade commander Wickham, had previously gone to Pego. The 2nd Royal Tank Regiment is ordered to break the roadblock, which is done, but Japanese snipers kill or injure most of the high-level commanders of the 63rd Indian Brigade. In Pego, the British launches a counterattack and drives the Japanese back. Meanwhile, to the north, the 7th Hussars runs into the HQ force of the 55th Japanese Division. After a brief engagement, it is ordered to pull back to Pego. The order is now to pull back from Pego, and that starts on the 7th of March, when they blow the bridge at Pego. The 7th Hussars clears the roadblock southwest of Pego, which again has been established by the Japanese, but they fail to leave a force holding it. So when the 48th Brigade comes, the Japanese have established the roadblock again. Several times the British have to fight to keep the road open before they manage to pull out of the threatening pocket. General Alexander now realizes that Rangoon is lost, and he orders all forces north towards Taiyuan. However, the Japanese 33rd Division has already reached the town and put up a strong blocking force. Unable to get through is the 7th Armored Brigade, the 17th Indian Division, and General Alexander with his HQ. If they cannot get through, only the weak 1st Burma Division stands between the Japanese and the rest of Burma, and perhaps even India. The situation is dire, to say the least. Several attacks during the 7th fails to clear the heavily defended roadblock. First the 7th Hussars tries, then the 2nd Royal Tank Regiment tries and also fails. Alexander now considers to disperse his forces and let them get north individually. However, another attack will be launched on the 8th. It's a last-ditch effort. On the 8th, the only troops that manages to launch an attack is the 7th Hussars together with the 11th Sikhs. They perform a bayonet charge and takes the roadblock with surprising ease. The Japanese had assumed that the British would fight for Rangoon, so after the 33rd Division had passed the roadblock, it was simply left almost unguarded. The British can now continue retreating north while the Japanese finds Rangoon empty of British troops to their surprise. The battle for central Burma. By the 18th of March, the Japanese Air Force gets reinforced and now have some 400 plus planes in Burma. End of March, the 213th Regiment of the 33rd Japanese Division arrives in Rangoon. From the end of March until the 19th of April, the 56th Japanese Division will arrive in Rangoon. On the 8th of April, the 18th Japanese Division arrives in Rangoon from the fighting in Malaya. The Allies, meanwhile, will also have some new troops. The Chinese Expeditionary Force is created with two armies, the 5th and the 6th, each having about the strength of a British division, but not having as many heavy weapons. They move into Burma by the end of February. The 5th Army will hold Kentung down to Loi Kham, and the 6th Chinese Army will hold Tungo with the 200th Division, and up north just west of the 5th Chinese Army. The British forces pull back to the Tarawadi area, but as the Chinese armies will not move further south than Tungo, they will have to pull back to the Prome area. 11th of March, the 1st Burma Division's both brigades attack south from the Nguyen Glebin area. By the 15th, they are ordered to pull back north. Meanwhile, Burma Corps is created and put under the command of Lieutenant General Slim. He arrives on the 16th of March. By the 21st, the 1st Burma Division had reached Tungo, fighting off several skirmishes with advanced troops of the 55th Japanese Division. They will be transported to the Prome area. The 13th Indian Brigade meanwhile moves from Mavchi to Mektila. By the 27th of March, the 17th Indian Division is at Prome, and the 1st Burma Division is at Kiauka Padung. the 7th Armored Brigade in reserve behind the 17th Indian Division. The Allied strategy is now to have each brigade defending a sector and a mobile force to handle Japanese penetrations. The Chinese at Tungo. By the 20th of March, the two Chinese armies have moved into position. The 5th 3 divisions, the 55th at Loikav, the 49th at Mongpan, and the 93rd Division at Kengtung. The 6th Chinese Army also has 3 divisions deployed as follows. The 200th Division at Tungo, with its cavalry unit at Piu, the 22nd Division at Lashio, and the 96th Division northeast of Loiwing inside China. On the 18th of March, the Japanese 55th Division attacks Piu, where they are held up in heavy fighting until the Chinese forces falls back towards Octvin. 20th of March, the 143rd Regiment from the 55th Japanese Division attacks the Chinese positions, but makes little headway, until the 23rd, when the Chinese forces pull back to the main defenses at Tungo. On the 24th, the 143rd Regiment swings north and attacks the airfield at Tungo, leaving the city blocked off on 3 sides. The 25th of March, the 55th Japanese Division launches their attack against Tungo. The 143rd Regiment is on the left, the 112th Regiment to its right, and a mixed force attacking alongside the river. Despite heavy fighting, the Japanese makes little headway until the 143rd Regiment makes a small penetration in the northeast. The Chinese 200th Division counterattacks. On the 26th, the 112th Regiment attacks the southwestern part of the city and takes it, but it cannot make any further headway. Chinese forces continues to counterattack, inflicting losses on the Japanese mixed cavalry unit at the river. By the evening, the Japanese hold the western part of the city. The Chinese 22nd Division moves to the north of Yedashe, forcing the Japanese 55th Division to send 1 battalion as a blocking force to handle this new threat. March 27th, Japanese planes attack Tungo, and artillery bombards the city, including the use of gas, but it is still holding out. Japanese planes have attacked the RAF and AVG at Magwe, and they are forced to pull back to India. March 28th. Again heavy artillery shelling of Tungo with some gas shells. The Japanese 112th Regiment makes some headway, and part of the 56th Japanese Division now crosses the Sitang River to flank the Chinese defenders. By the 30th, the Chinese have pulled back in good order. The 56th Japanese Division heads northeast. The 55th and the 18th Japanese Divisions are heading towards Mandalay. By the 28th of March, the 33rd Japanese Division have moved and attacked Paungde. The British strike force is deployed to handle this attack, but by the 29th of March, they have to turn north to handle another Japanese attack at Padingon. The Japanese 125th Regiment crosses the Irrawaddy and digs in just south of Prome, blocking the retreat of the British strike force. Between the 29th and the 30th, several attacks by the British strike force from the south and the 17th Indian Division from the north does not manage to dislodge the Japanese force. In the end, they finally manages to fight their way through, but with considerable losses in both men and material. On the 30th, the Japanese 33rd Division attacks Prome. The 17th Indian Division holds them for a couple of days, inflicting some casualties. But on the 2nd of April, it has to fall back. The new Allied plan is to protect the oil fields at Chauk. The 1st Burma Brigade is now at Migyangye, the 48th Indian Brigade and part of the 7th Armored Brigade at Kokogave. The 17th Indian Division is at Taungdavingi. The Japanese 56th Division is heading towards Mavchi, which they occupy on the 4th of April. Chinese troops clashes with Japanese forces at Bavlake. 12th of April. The 1st Burma Brigade enters Alebo after a report of Japanese forces there, but the Japanese forces have left the town by that time. The brigade now withdraws to protect Myoyange, but that has been occupied by the Japanese 33rd Division meanwhile. They try to retake the city but fails. Meanwhile, the 33rd Japanese Division attacks both the 1st Burma Division and the 48th Indian Brigade. The 1st Burma Division falls back north, but the 33rd Japanese Division manages to infiltrate a force between the 17th Indian Division at Tangdawingi and the 1st Burma Division south of Yenangyaung, creating several roadblocks and splitting British forces into several groups. 15th of April, the oil fields and refineries are destroyed at Yenangyaung. On the 18th, British forces starts attacking in direction of Yenangyaung, and on the 19th, the 38th Chinese Division, supported with elements from the 7th Armored Brigade, joins in. The 1st Burma Division manages to get away, but they lose all wheeled vehicles and additional troops. They reach Mount Popa to rest and refit, now having a strength of only 3,000 men. On the 18th and 19th, the Japanese 56th Division destroys the 55th Chinese Division at Loi Kav. General retreat towards India and China. The situation is now untenable for the British and Chinese forces. The Chinese 5th, 6th and 66th armies will retreat to China, with some parts of the Chinese forces retreating instead in direction of India. The British and some Chinese forces starts pulling back on the 25th, 26th towards Ava Bridge, just south of Mandalay. First to arrive is the 38th Chinese Division. 1st Burma Brigade and the 13th Indian Brigade heads towards the Samaikon ferry. The 2nd Burma Brigade is on the western bank of the river, and that should retreat towards Pauk. It is now at Paukuku. The 17th Indian Division crosses the Ava Bridge. The 63rd Indian Brigade plus the 7th Armored Brigade are holding in the rear at Mektila. The 48th Indian Brigade is north at Kayukse. 27th of April. The 1st Burma Division crosses at the Semikon ferry, minus the 2nd Burma Brigade. It reaches Moniva by the 30th of April. The 2nd Burma Brigade moves to Pauk on the 28th of April. The 48th Indian Brigade fights the Japanese at Kyaukse until the 30th, when it also crosses the Ava Bridge, now being held by the 63rd and 7th Armored Brigades. They will soon also cross the bridge and then destroy it. Situation is now as follows. Part of the 1st Burma Division is defending the town of Monjava with a small force. The division HQ is at Mayu. The 1st Burma Brigade and the 13th Indian Brigade is still further south, heading towards Shaungu. 30th of April. Japanese forces put Monjava under harassing fire across the river. Slim now orders the 1st Burma Division to assemble its forces at Chaungyu. The 48th and 63rd Indian Brigade should move from Sagaing by rail to Chaungyu. 1st of May. Japanese 33rd Division attacks Monjava and captures it. Mayu had been captured the previous day. The 63rd Indian Brigade attacks and recaptures Mayu. 2nd of May. The 13th and 63rd Indian Brigades attacks Manjava but are unable to capture it. The 48th Indian Brigade will attack in the afternoon, but they are also unable to push out the Japanese. It is now decided that the 1st Burma Brigade and the 63rd Indian Brigade should pull back to Alon. The 17th Indian Infantry Division is holding at Yeju. Japanese forces had by now captured Kaleva. Part of the 17th Indian Division rushes to put up a blocking force at Shwegi. Most forces now head for India, in split-up formations. The 17th Indian Division reaches Tammu on the 17th of May. The 1st Burma Division followed the east side of the river and crossed at Pantha, reaching Tammu on the 16th of May, having only 2,000 men left. The 2nd Burma Brigade retreats towards Kalemio and was met with transports some miles south of the place, transporting them to Tammu. Some Chinese forces also made it to India under very harsh conditions. They will later be re-equipped and brought up to a strength of 5 divisions. This ends the Japanese invasion of Burma. Aftermath. The British suffered between 14 to 30,000 casualties, losing about 100 to 190 plus planes and maybe 100 tanks. The Chinese had around 40,000 casualties. The Japanese had between 4,500 to 6,500 casualties and lost a couple of hundred planes. The Japanese conquered the country much as it had done in Malaya. They used swift troops, flanked as often as they could, and gained air superiority a bit into the battle. The British forces were not strong enough and had too little jungle training. They also did not have air superiority. They engaged the Japanese too close to the border, and after that they mainly had to fight a long retreat back towards India, even if it probably did not feel that way for the troops at hand at the time. Some notable military blunders happened. The biggest was the Japanese roadblock that was first established north of Burma, cutting off most of the British army. They, following orders strict to the letter, left that roadblock and headed to Rangoon, and so let the British escape north. A smaller British blunder was leaving Paku too early, letting the Japanese again threaten the British forces with a flanking maneuver. The Chinese forces put up the strongest defense against the Japanese, but British forces on occasion managed to inflict some heavy casualties also. After the British had lost Rangoon, it was a hard battle trying to protect Burma against the Japanese. The Japanese again always put pressure on the defender, never really giving them time to dig in and prepare for an attack. As far as I can see, after the fall of Rangoon, it was not much else the British could have done to defeat the Japanese. They simply were too ill prepared for the fighting. They would make that up in the coming years when they also perfected the art of jungle warfare. This is my movie about the Japanese invasion of Burma 1941-42. There will be coming an episode regarding the years 42 to 45. I hope you liked this video. If you did, like and subscribe, and see you at the next video.